When you physically injure yourself, the physics of that pain are, pretty straightforward.
Right, very cause and effect.
Exactly. Like you stub your toe on the coffee table, the nerve endings in your foot fire off a signal, your brain registers, ouch. And maybe you hop around for a minute holding your foot, but it's binary.
Yeah.
It happens, it hurts, and then it's just over.
Because the physical event creates a physical sensation. And as soon as the event concludes, the body, it immediately initiates the process of returning to baseline. It's this highly efficient, self-contained biological cycle.
Right, but look at emotional pain, and suddenly those straightforward rules of physics they completely fall apart.
Oh, entirely. Yeah.
Like you experience a rejection, or you lose a job, or you go through a deeply painful breakup, and that pain, you could be feeling the exact same intense, suffocating level of hurt like 5 years later while you're just standing in line at the grocery store holding a carton of milk.
Yeah, holding milk and suddenly you're devastated all over again.
Exactly. It's like the X-ray machine for our emotional lives is just fundamentally broken.
Well, we treat emotional suffering like a stubbed toe.
Right.
We wait for the tissue to eventually heal on its own. But the problem is the injury isn't in the tissue.
Right.
It's in the psychological framework we use to interpret the world, which is why waiting for time to heal it, it rarely works.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. That broken X-ray machine for our emotional lives is exactly what we are fixing today.
I'm very excited for this one.
Me too. We're looking at a really fascinating source document titled Pain Equals Ego. It's a source document on the ego as the architecture of suffering.
Yeah.
And our mission for this deep dive is to explore a truly provocative idea from this text. The idea is that our prolonged emotional pain isn't just something that passively happens to us from the outside world. It is something we unconsciously manufacture to prove we exist.
Which is heavy. The central proposition of this text requires a really radical reframing of how we view our inner lives.
Yeah, it really does.
Because the author argues that without the ego's architecture, meaning its reliance on story and memory and self-concept, psychological pain cannot persist.
It literally cannot stick around for 5 years.
Exactly. Without the ego actively holding on to it, pain simply arises and dissolves. It moves through you like sound moving through empty space.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we're going to talk about how we manufacture our own pain, we have to deeply understand the machinery doing the manufacturing. We have to talk about the ego.
Right.
And ego is a word that gets thrown around a lot in pop psychology, usually as an insult for someone who talks about themselves too much at a dinner party.
Yeah, the guy who won't stop talking about his golf swing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's not what the source means here, right?
No, not at all. The source material is very careful to clarify that the ego is not the villain of this story, nor is it just a synonym for arrogance.
Okay.
The ego is a completely necessary functional structure. It's the condensation of your identity, your boundaries, your memories, your preferences.
It's the part of consciousness that says I.
Yes. Without that localized sense of I, you wouldn't be able to navigate time or maintain relationships or, even know where your physical body ends and another person begins.
It's the operational software for being a human in the physical world.
That's a great way to put it.
I was trying to visualize this while reading through the notes, and the best analogy I could come up with is a deep-sea diving suit.
Oh, I like that.
Think of the ego like one of those incredibly heavy, pressurized, vintage metal diving suits. If you want to survive the immense pressure of the ocean bottom, if you want to walk around down there, pick things up, navigate the environment, you absolutely need the suit.
You'd be crushed without it.
Right. You cannot exist in that realm without it.
What's fascinating here is how that visual perfectly sets up the vulnerability the text describes. Because the suit provides the boundary you need to survive. But the very act of putting on that suit isolates you from the ocean itself.
Yes. The suit's entire job is to keep you separate from out there. It has to constantly monitor and defend that boundary. And because you are sealed off inside this heavy suit, every single time you bump into a rock or a current pushes you, the suit registers it as an impact.
And that structural separation, that isolation, is what the text identifies as the original hurt beneath all hurts.
Wait, the original hurt?
Yeah. The ego is fundamentally built on the premise of separateness, of being a distinct, bounded, and vulnerable self. So therefore, it is inherently a wound bearer.
Oh, wow.
To be an ego is to be something that can be threatened. The possibility of suffering isn't a glitch in the software, it's a structural feature of its existence.
So the bump against the rock only matters because deep down, the person inside the suit is terrified the suit is going to breach.
Exactly. When we experience a specific acute wound in our lives, like rejection or failure or betrayal, those events only devastate us because they land on that pre-existing tender belief of separateness.
So the pain isn't generated entirely by the external event.
No, it's generated in the collision between that external event and the ego's underlying constant terror that it's alone or unworthy or insufficient. An ego in pain is always at its very bottom expressing some variation of I am not connected, I am not held, or I am not enough.
Okay, if the ego is this structure built on separateness, how exactly does it process a negative event? Because I want to push back on this on behalf of anyone listening.
Sure, go for it.
Wait, is the source saying our suffering isn't real?
Yeah.
Because I think anyone listening to this who has been through genuine heartbreak or profound grief or just a massive life failure would argue that the pain is incredibly, undeniably real. You feel it in your bones. Are we just supposed to write that off as an illusion?
No, and the source text explicitly anticipates that pushback.
Good.
It does not claim that suffering isn't real or that you aren't feeling it. What it does is explain the mechanics of what that suffering is actually made of.
Okay.
It draws a very sharp, crucial line between a raw biological sensation and sustained human suffering.
Break down the mechanics of that line for me. What happens in the body versus what happens in the mind?
Okay, let's say you open an email and get some terrible news about a project you've been working on. Instantly, your amygdala sounds the alarm.
Right, the fight or flight kicks in.
Exactly. Your body releases a flush of cortisol and adrenaline. You feel a severe physical contraction in your chest, your stomach drops, your heart rate spikes. The text defines this as raw, non-narrative sensation.
Non-narrative, like it's just pure physics at that point.
Pure physics. Energy is moving through your physical nervous system. But that raw sensation is not yet pain in the sustained psychological sense.
Really?
Yeah. Biologically, the chemical flush of an emotion only lasts in the bloodstream for about 90 seconds.
90 seconds. Wait, but people stay angry about an email for 90 days, sometimes 90 weeks.
Right, and that is where the ego steps in.
Ah.
The ego transforms a 90-second raw physical sensation into sustained chronic pain through a very specific psychological loop.
What's the loop?
First, it receives the sensation. Second, it identifies with it. Third, it builds a narrative around it. And finally, it perpetuates that narrative.
Oh, wow. So it goes from my chest is tight to my boss hates my work to I am a failure to I will never succeed in this industry.
Exactly. Pain, the text argues, is a loop the ego runs. It is not the external event itself.
I want you, the listener, to really think about your own life for a second. Think about how often you run this exact loop.
We all do it.
You take a raw, fleeting sensation, maybe just a tiny flutter of anxiety in your stomach before a meeting, or a brief flash of sadness when a friend doesn't text you back, and instantly, almost magically, you attach a grand, sweeping narrative to it about your ultimate self-worth.
Yep. Yeah.
You take a 2-second physiological response and you stretch it into a 3-day psychological crisis, just sitting on the couch ruminating.
And we run that narrative loop because it is the ego's primary mechanism for converting a passing bodily sensation into a permanent fixture of our identity.
The ego uses the story to explain the physical contraction.
Yes, and in doing so, it keeps the contraction alive.
But that brings up a massive paradox.
Also,
Well, if pain is just this miserable loop that makes us unhappy, basic logic dictates we should just turn it off. Like if you pick up a hot coal, your central nervous system tells your hand to drop it immediately.
right.
So why don't we drop the narrative? Why do we hold on to the hot coal for 5 years?
This is perhaps the most challenging and important equation presented in the source document. The ego does not just suffer. The ego protects its suffering.
It defends the very thing that's hurting it. Why?
Because over time, that pain becomes a foundational pillar of the ego's identity.
Okay.
To release the pain would mean releasing the story of the pain. And to release the story would require dissolving a portion of the ego itself.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The ego defines itself by what it has survived, by who wronged it, by the unfairness of its circumstances. If you strip all of those stories away, the ego faces an existential void. It doesn't know who it is anymore.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about this structurally, like scaffolding on a building.
Scaffolding.
Let's say you go through a trauma or a massive betrayal. To survive it, you build this dense, heavy scaffolding of pain, grievance, and self-protection around yourself.
Yeah.
It helps you stand up while you're weak, But decades later, the building has structurally integrated the scaffolding. Your entire identity at work or in relationships relies on being the one who was wronged.
Wow, yes.
If someone comes along and offers to take the scaffolding down, if someone offers you true healing, you don't feel relief. You feel terrified because it feels like the whole building is going to collapse.
Because the source text implies that the ego actually mistakes healing for annihilation.
It thinks it's dying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It clings to suffering not out of masochism, but out of its deepest, most primal instinct, which is to survive, to remain coherent, and to keep its familiar shape.
That's incredibly...
That grief that stays with you for years, or that imaginary argument you keep having in the shower with someone you haven't spoken to in a decade.
Oh, I'm guilty of the shower arguments.
We all are. But the text argues these aren't failures of your ability to heal. They are the ego successfully performing its function. It is maintaining its boundaries through the architecture of pain.
It's a terrifying realization. The idea that stepping out of the victim identity or simply dropping a long-held grudge is actually perceived by our own neurological warning systems as a life or death threat.
And this raises an important question about how we manage our daily lives. Because the text is clear that the initial sensation of pain is a valid, necessary signal.
Right. It's not saying ignore your boundaries.
No, not at all. It carries crucial information about boundaries that have been violated or needs that aren't being met. The error isn't in feeling the initial sting.
Okay.
The error is when the ego folds that signal into our permanent identity, and we organize our entire existence around managing the scaffolding rather than addressing the core structural issue.
We spend all our energy painting the scaffolding, reinforcing the scaffolding, complaining about how heavy the scaffolding is, instead of just taking it down.
Precisely. The ego holds the pain open. It keeps it unprocessed and suspended in a narrative. And that is the exact mechanism that causes pain to become chronic and self-generating.
Man. So if we have successfully mapped out this incredibly intricate, self-defeating trap that the mind sets for us, we need to talk about the escape route.
Yes, let's talk solutions.
How do we dismantle the scaffolding without feeling like we are going to collapse?
Well, the source document points to two primary interconnected avenues for dismantling this architecture. One is the cultivation of the witness, and the other is relying on the inherent wisdom of the body.
Let's look at the witness first.
Okay, so almost every contemplative and meditative tradition in human history arrives at this practice. The goal is to cultivate a part of consciousness that can observe the ego's pain loop without getting captured by it.
I understand the concept of observing, but how does the witness actually stop the loop mechanically? Like, what is physically happening when you do that?
It comes down to observation without identification. Neurologically, you are shifting the brain's activity from the reactive amygdala to the observant prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
When you feel that sudden heat in your chest because someone criticized you, the ego's instinct is to immediately attach the thought, they disrespect me, I am under attack.
Right, the story.
But the witness simply observes the heat in the chest. You feel the physical sensation, but you refuse to provide the narrative fuel.
Oh, I see.
Because the witness has no wound and no story to defend, the sensation peaks and then naturally burns out, has nothing to attach to.
So the pain simply completes its natural 90-second chemical cycle and dissolves because you didn't give it a story to cling to.
Exactly. The text notes that in the space of the witness, pain is revealed to be just energy moving through the physical body, which actually brings us to the second avenue, which is the body itself.
Right.
The body is the living field where the ego operates, but the body is not the ego.
Because the body doesn't tell stories about the past or worry about the future. It just exists in the present moment. Spot on. And the text introduces this concept of somatic residue.
Somatic residue, okay.
Those chronic aches, the perpetual tension in your jaw, the tightness in your gut that is often the physical residue of the stories the ego is hoarding.
Wow.
The body didn't create the story of your unworthiness. It is simply receiving the relentless biological stress of the ego constantly broadcasting that story.
So somatic healing is about getting the sensation out of the ego's narrative control and putting it back into the body's jurisdiction.
Exactly.
Wait, I have to stop you here and really challenge this.
Okay.
Are we saying we can heal a deep, complex psychological wound without actually analyzing or understanding it?
Yes.
Because that goes against the entire foundation of modern self-improvement and traditional talk therapy. Like, we are taught that to heal, we have to talk about the trauma for hours, dissect it, trace it back to our childhood, and intellectually conquer the root cause.
I know. And the source document fundamentally challenges that modern paradigm.
According to the text, understanding is the ego's preferred tool. The ego desperately wants to dissect, categorize, and explain the pain
Why? Why does it want to explain it?
because analyzing the pain keeps the ego engaged. It keeps the ego in the driver's seat.
Oh my God.
If you spend 3 years intellectually analyzing why your boss's comment made you feel worthless, you are still living inside the ego's architecture. You haven't escaped the loop, you've just decorated it.
That is wild. You haven't escaped the loop, you've just decorated it. So if understanding it is a trap, how does somatic healing actually work in practice? Give me a step-by-step of what that looks like when you are triggered.
Sure. So the body's tool is not analysis. Its tool is completion.
Completion.
Let's say you have that triggering encounter.
Yeah.
Instead of journaling for 3 hours about the psychological origins of your anger, you drop your attention entirely into your physical form.
Okay.
You notice your jaw is clenched. You notice your breathing is incredibly shallow. Somatic healing asks you to feel that tension without judgment. You breathe deeply into the tightness in your chest.
So no words, just feeling.
Right. You might literally need to shake your arms out,
Yeah.
go for a sprint, or let yourself cry without needing to know exactly why you were crying.
Wow.
You are allowing the physical nervous system to discharge the adrenaline and complete the energetic cycle that the ego's storytelling interrupted.
It's like watching an animal in the wild.
Yes.
When an antelope escapes a lion, it doesn't sit under a tree and psychoanalyze the lion's motives.
No, it doesn't journal about its childhood.
Right. It literally stands there and shakes violently for a few minutes to discharge the terror from its nervous system, and then it just goes back to grazing.
That is the perfect example.
Yeah.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it requires a complete overhaul of how we define healing.
Yeah, I'll say.
Healing isn't about scrubbing your life clean of pain or trying to achieve a state where the ego never gets hurt. That is impossible as long as you are human. Healing is about loosening the ego's rigid grip on the pain-producing structure itself. It is the practice of returning the raw experience to the body to process physically without the compulsion to mentally understand it.
So what does this all mean? If we pull all these threads together, the core takeaway for you listening is this wild paradox of selflessness.
Yeah.
The ego, which was built entirely for our survival and self-preservation, is actually the primary manufacturer of our prolonged suffering.
It really is.
The very heavy diving suit we put on to protect ourselves from being crushed is the exact mechanism that keeps us feeling isolated and bruised for years.
It is a profound and challenging paradox. But as the text beautifully states in its conclusion, the equation pain equals ego is not meant to be an indictment.
It's not blaming you.
No, it's not a moral failure on your part when you hurt, and it doesn't mean your pain isn't real. It is simply a map.
A map.
It's a map leading us out of the labyrinth of our own stories, back to a sense of self that is infinitely larger than our wounds, a self that doesn't need to constantly generate suffering just to remember that it is alive.
The next time you feel a familiar chronic emotional pain flaring up, that sudden anger at an old memory or that sinking heavy feeling of not being enough, just pause for 1 second.
Just 1 second.
Ask yourself, is this just the raw sensation of the present moment moving through my body, or is my ego playing its favorite reruns to remind me I exist? What would happen if, just for a moment, you felt the physical contraction in your chest, dropped the storyline entirely, and just let the feeling dissolve into empty space?
You might just find out who you are when the scaffolding finally comes down.
Until next time.